Why was the forest so silent that night? Why did the crickets stop singing, and why did the wind refuse to pass through the trees? In the middle of that uneasy stillness, a faint groan echoed. It wasn't the cry of an animal, it was a man's voice. Somewhere deep in the forest, tied to a thick tree trunk, a ranger struggled with ropes that cut into his wrists. His breath was heavy, his face streaked with sweat and dust. He whispered to himself, who could have done this? And why here? The forest around him was alive with shadows, but no one answered. Only the smell of damp earth and fear filled the air. The ranger tugged against the ropes, each pull only burning his skin more. His boots pressed into the ground, but the knots were too tight. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening. Leaves rustled somewhere close. At first, he thought it was the wind. Then he heard the soft crack of a branch snapping, and his heart began to race. Is it them coming back? Or something worse? He muttered under his breath. From the darkness, two eyes glowed, golden, sharp, and unblinking. A low growl rolled through the air, not loud, but enough to send shivers down his spine. The ranger froze. It wasn't a man, it wasn't a wolf either. Slowly, out of the bushes, a sleek, reddish-brown shape appeared, a fossa. Its body moved with the grace of a predator, its long tail swaying low, its ears pointed forward. The ranger's breath caught. Fossas were rare, almost ghost-like in these forests. To see one so close was already unusual, but for it to stare directly at him, that was something else. The animal circled him, sniffing the ground, eyes never leaving his face. The ranger tried not to move, but the ropes forced his chest to rise and fall in quick, panicked breaths. "Don't come closer, please," he whispered. But the fossa did come closer, its nose brushing the rope, its head tilting as if studying the trap that held him. The man's fear mixed with a strange curiosity. Why wasn't it attacking? Why did it feel like the animal understood something? The silence broke when the ranger heard voices in the distance, low, rough voices. He recognized them. The same men who had tied him here, poachers. They were coming back. His chest tightened as the fear rose again. No, not now, he thought desperately. But before he could say more, the fossa let out a deep growl, its fur bristling, its gaze shifting toward the direction of the voices. The ranger swallowed hard. Something was about to happen. The voices drew closer, footsteps crunching over dry leaves, careless yet heavy with menace. The ranger's heart pounded as he pressed himself against the bark of the tree, as though he could melt into it and vanish. He recognized those voices, rough, cruel, the same men who had overpowered him just hours earlier. Their laughter rang out like broken glass in the silence of the forest. One of them said in a sharp whisper, "We left him tied here. If anyone finds him, we're finished." Another voice, deeper and slower, replied, "No one comes this far at night. He'll be gone by morning, and the animals will do the rest." The ranger clenched his fists in helpless fury. His chest rose and fell fast, his breath shallow. His mind screamed for escape, but the ropes cut deeper with every slight movement. He felt trapped, not just by the knots, but by the cruel certainty in their words. If they found him still alive, what then? Would they silence him for good? But then he remembered the golden eyes watching him in the dark. He turned his head slowly. The fossa had not left. It crouched low, tail twitching, body tight like a coiled spring. Its ears flicked as it listened to the approaching men. The ranger whispered under his breath, voice trembling, "Go! You have to go. If they see you, they'll kill you too." The fossa tilted its head, almost as though it understood, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it moved closer, pressing its nose against the thick rope that bound the ranger's wrists. The animal's teeth grazed the fiber, testing it. The ranger froze. Could it be trying to bite through? The sound of laughter burst through the trees. The men were close now, their torchlight cutting through the darkness in sharp yellow beams. Shadows twisted against the trunks, growing taller as they neared. The fossa let out a sudden growl, low but guttural, sending chills through the air. The ranger's pulse quickened. "No, don't draw attention," he whispered harshly, but it was too late. The light landed on him. "There he is," one of the poachers said with a cruel grin. The ranger's blood turned cold. 3 men stepped into the clearing, their faces rugged and merciless. Each carried a weapon, a machete, a rusted rifle, and a knife glinting under the torchlight. They stopped short when they noticed the animal crouched by the ranger. "What is that?" One of them spat. The man with the rifle sneered. "It's a Fossa. Stupid creature. Must think he's prey." He raised the gun slightly, the barrel catching the light. The ranger's stomach dropped. "No, don't shoot," he cried out without thinking. His voice cracked in desperation. The poachers laughed. "Why do you care? You'll be gone by sunrise anyway." But before the gunman could lift his weapon fully, the Fossa sprang. It moved with a speed that blurred the edges of sight, its sleek body a flash of reddish-brown fur. The men staggered back in shock as the animal's sharp claws raked against the rifle, knocking it sideways. A loud shot cracked through the night, the bullet tearing harmlessly into the ground. Birds exploded from the treetops, filling the air with a frenzy of wings. "Get it!" one of the men shouted, swinging his machete wildly. But the Fossa darted around them, too fast, too cunning. Its growls echoed, sharp and unrelenting. The ranger's eyes widened. He had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just an animal defending its territory. It looked deliberate, strategic, almost as if it was protecting him. The poachers cursed, stumbling to regain control. "Kill it before it brings more trouble." But in that moment of chaos, the Fossa returned to the ranger, its teeth sinking into the rope with ferocious determination. The fibers frayed, snapping one by one. The ranger felt his right wrist loosen. His breath caught. Freedom was within reach. One of the poachers spotted what was happening. "It's freeing him," he shouted. Rage twisted his face as he lunged forward with the knife. "Move!" The ranger shouted, but the Fossa leapt again, slashing at the man's arm. The knife clattered to the dirt, glinting in the dim light. The man howled in pain. The ranger struggled against the half-torn rope, pushing and pulling until finally, it gave way. His arms were free. He gasped, feeling blood return to his numb hands. Without wasting a second, he reached for the fallen knife, gripping it tight. His body trembled, not from weakness, but from the surge of adrenaline that roared in his veins. The men stared at him with wide, furious eyes. The one with the machete growled, "You think you'll walk away from this?" The ranger raised the blade, his voice low but steady. "I don't plan on dying here tonight." The Fossa stood beside him, back arched, teeth bared, tail lashing side to side. The sight was surreal, a man and a predator side by side, facing the danger together. One poacher lunged, machete swinging. The ranger blocked with the knife, sparks flying as the blades clashed. The impact jolted his arm, but he held firm. The Fossa darted forward, snapping at the man's leg, forcing him to stumble. Chaos erupted in the clearing. Torches fell to the ground, flames licking at the dry leaves. Shadows twisted across the forest floor as men shouted, metal clashed, and the Fossa's growls tore through the night. "Enough!" The gunman shouted, scrambling for his rifle again. He lifted it shakily, aiming straight at the ranger. Time slowed. The ranger's eyes locked onto the barrel, his chest tightening. But before the trigger could be pulled, the Fossa launched upward, claws raking across the man's face. The rifle fired, the bullet slicing into the darkness far from its target. The man screamed, clutching his bloodied skin, dropping the weapon. The ranger seized the chance. He kicked the gun into the undergrowth, out of reach. His breath was ragged, every muscle in his body screaming, but he refused to stop. The poachers, now injured and shaken, glanced at each other. Their confidence cracked. One hissed, "This isn't worth it." "Let's go!" But the leader spat, "No! We end it now!" They lunged together, 2 against 1, machete blades flashing in the firelight. The ranger barely had time to react. He raised the knife, parrying one strike, but the second cut across his arm. Pain seared through him, hot and sharp. He staggered, teeth gritted, refusing to fall. The Fossa hurled itself at the second man's chest, claws ripping into fabric and flesh. The man screamed, stumbling backward, blood staining his shirt. The ranger pushed forward, striking with desperate strength, his blade catching the other man's shoulder. Both enemies cried out, retreating clumsily into the shadows. Their breaths came in harsh gasps, their confidence shattered. One of them yelled, voice cracking with fear, "This forest isn't worth dying in. Leave him!" And just like that, they fled, disappearing into the darkness, their footsteps crashing through the undergrowth until only silence remained. The ranger collapsed to his knees, knife slipping from his hand. His chest heaved as he tried to steady his breath. Sweat drenched his face, blood dripped from his wound, but he was alive. Alive because of the animal beside him. The Fossa stood there, panting, its fur bristled, eyes glowing with something the ranger could not name. It didn't leave. It didn't attack. It simply watched him, as though waiting for his next move. For a long moment, man and animal stared at each other in the glow of dying torch flames. The ranger whispered, voice hoarse, "Why did you help me?" The Fossa tilted its head, silent, unreadable. But in that silence, the ranger felt something stir inside him, a realization that this night was not just about survival. It was the beginning of something far greater. And then, deep in the forest, a new sound rose. A distant howl. Not a wolf, but something heavier, deeper. The ranger's blood ran cold. He looked up sharply into the darkness beyond the trees. The Fossa growled, ears flattening. Whatever was coming next was not finished with them. The howl lingered in the forest like a wound in the silence, low and drawn out, vibrating through the air. The ranger froze, his body still weak from the struggle, but his senses were sharper than ever now. That sound wasn't just a predator marking its presence. It was a warning. Something was moving toward them. The Fossa remained rigid, fur bristling along its spine, lips curled back to reveal sharp teeth. Its eyes narrowed, golden irises fixed on the darkness beyond the tree line. The ranger swallowed hard, forcing himself to his feet despite the pain in his arm. He pressed his back to the tree for support, knife still in his hand. His breath came out in harsh gasps. "Another one?" he whispered, his voice trembling. His own words seemed to vanish into the night. The forest answered with another sound, the crunch of branches under heavy weight. Whatever approached was large, much larger than a Fossa. The ranger's thoughts raced. It couldn't be a wolf, not here. Leopards sometimes roamed, but this sound felt heavier, slower, deliberate. His eyes darted toward the fallen torches, their flames still licking at the leaves, casting shadows that danced unnaturally. Suddenly, a deep growl rolled from the darkness, making the ground beneath him seem to hum. The ranger's pulse hammered. He turned to the Fossa. "You hear it too, don't you?" he whispered. The animal's stance answered him clearly. Yes, it did. Then came a shape. Just a silhouette at first, moving between the trees with steady, menacing steps. Two pale eyes glowed faintly, catching the firelight. The ranger tensed, knife raised even though he knew it was almost useless. His mind raced through possibilities. A stray big cat? Something even more dangerous? The shape emerged fully into the clearing, and for a moment the ranger forgot to breathe. It was a hyena, huge, its shoulders thick and hunched, its jaws wide with teeth glistening in the firelight. But this one was different. Scars crisscrossed its body, one ear torn to half its size, and its eyes carried a madness that told of battles survived and hunger that never ended. The ranger muttered under his breath, "Of all the things to come now." His grip on the knife tightened, though he knew facing a beast like this alone was madness. The hyena lowered its head, sniffing the air. Its nose twitched, catching the scent of blood, the ranger's blood. A low, ugly, laugh-like sound rumbled from its throat. The ranger had heard that sound before, and it had haunted him for years. It was the sound of an animal that enjoyed fear almost as much as flesh. The Fossa stepped forward, placing itself between the ranger and the intruder. Its growl deepened, tail lashing side to side. The ranger stared at it in disbelief. You're not going to back down, are you?" The hyena's lips curled back, saliva glistening. With sudden force it lunged forward, jaws snapping. The Fossa leapt sideways, swift as lightning, avoiding the strike by inches. The ranger stumbled back, nearly tripping over roots as he tried to keep his balance. The clash of predator against predator erupted before his eyes. Raw and brutal, the hyena snapped again, its jaws clamping shut with a sickening crack. But the fossa darted too quickly, claws slicing across its muzzle. Blood streaked down the hyena's face, making its laughter turn into a furious snarl. It shook its head violently, then swung its massive body toward the ranger. No! The ranger raised the knife, though fear rattled his bones. The hyena lunged. He barely had time to throw himself sideways, crashing hard against the tree. Pain flared in his wounded arm, but adrenaline pushed him up again. The fossa slammed into the hyena's side, biting into its shoulder with ferocity that seemed impossible for its size. The hyena roared, twisting, trying to shake it off, but the fossa clung like fire, claws digging deeper. For a moment, the ranger thought the impossible. Maybe the smaller predator could actually hold its ground, but the hyena's strength was overwhelming. With a violent jerk, it flung the fossa aside. The smaller animal hit the ground hard, rolling before struggling back to its feet, growling despite the pain. The ranger's heart lurched. He rushed forward, knife raised, slashing at the hyena's flank. The blade tore across its skin, not deep enough to stop it, but enough to draw blood. The hyena spun toward him, eyes wild with rage. The ranger stumbled backward, chest heaving. The fire from the fallen torches spread wider now, licking the edges of the clearing, filling the air with smoke. Shadows twisted, and the ranger's vision blurred from the heat. He coughed, eyes stinging, but refused to let go of the knife. The hyena stalked closer, each step heavy, deliberate. Its gaze locked on him. Then, just as it lunged, the fossa sprang from behind, leaping onto its back. Claws raked, teeth bit, and the hyena shrieked, bucking wildly. The ranger seized the moment, charging forward with every ounce of strength left in him. He drove the knife into the beast's side, burying it to the hilt. The hyena screamed, twisting violently, but the blade held. It thrashed, crashing into trees, rolling, trying to dislodge the fossa and the knife. The ranger barely managed to pull himself back, collapsing against a tree, lungs burning, arm bleeding heavily. He could only watch now, his vision spinning, as the hyena staggered, weakened by blood loss and the relentless attack. Finally, with one last furious snarl, the beast broke free, tearing into the undergrowth, vanishing into the darkness with heavy, crashing footsteps. Its cries echoed into the night until they faded into silence. The ranger slumped to the ground, chest heaving, knife falling from his shaking hand. He turned his head slowly. The fossa limped toward him, its body scratched, fur matted with blood, but its eyes still burned with fire. It stopped just a foot away, standing tall despite its injuries, and stared at him. The ranger's voice cracked. Why are you helping me?" The forest answered with silence, broken only by the crackle of flames. For a moment, he thought the animal would leave, but then it lowered itself onto the ground beside him, not too close, not too far, just near enough that its presence was undeniable. The ranger leaned back, staring at the sky through the canopy of smoke. His body screamed with exhaustion, but his mind was alive with questions. What had tied their fates together tonight? Was this creature truly protecting him, or was there something deeper, something unseen, guiding them both? Then in the distance another sound rose. Not the laugh of a hyena this time. Something else. A voice, human. The ranger's eyes snapped open wider. He heard shouts, different from the poachers. Urgent, disciplined voices cutting through the forest. He recognized them instantly. His team. The rangers. Relief surged through him like a wave, but it was laced with dread. If they arrived now and saw the fossa by his side, what would they do? Rangers were trained to keep wildlife at a distance. They would never believe what he had just lived through. The voices grew louder. "Over here! Spread out!" Torches bobbed between the trees, closer and closer. The ranger looked at the fossa, whose eyes glimmered in the firelight. He whispered urgently, "Go. They can't see you here. They won't understand." But the fossa didn't move. It stood, tail twitching, gaze shifting between the oncoming rangers and the wounded man it had chosen not to abandon. The ranger's chest tightened. A new tension now filled him, not of survival but of truth. Would his own people believe what he had seen? Or would they see this creature as nothing more than a threat to be chased away? The first ranger burst into the clearing, gasping at the sight of fire, blood, and his comrade wounded against the tree. His eyes widened as they landed on the animal beside him. "Stay back!" he shouted, raising his rifle. The injured ranger forced himself to speak, his voice hoarse but strong. "No, don't shoot!" The others arrived, surrounding the clearing, guns raised, eyes locked on the fossa. The air grew thick with tension. One wrong move, and the animal that had saved him might not survive the night. The ranger's mind raced. He had seconds to decide, seconds to protect the truth of what had just happened. His heart pounded as he stepped forward, raising his bloody hand in desperation, and in that charged silence, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The ranger's throat was dry, his voice almost breaking as he forced himself to shout again. "Don't shoot! Put your guns down!" His words cracked the tense silence, but they didn't ease it. The rangers around him froze for a moment, confusion painted across their faces. Their eyes flicked between their injured comrade, the spreading fire, and the fossa standing by his side, its body tense, golden eyes burning through the torchlight. The leader of the group, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, barked an order. "Hold your aim! That thing is dangerous. Step away from it!" His voice was firm, yet beneath it was a layer of concern for the ranger slumped against the tree. The ranger, still weak, his arm bloodied, his clothes torn, lifted both hands shakily. "You don't understand," he said, his voice ragged but filled with urgency. "It saved me," one of the younger rangers frowned. "Saved you? From what?" "That's a predator. It was about to finish you." His rifle trembled slightly as he aimed, torn between obedience and hesitation. "No!" The wounded ranger snapped, his sudden strength surprising even himself. "You weren't here. You didn't see. If it wasn't for this animal, I'd already be dead." The fossa growled softly, its gaze shifting to the armed men, ears pinned back. It was cornered, yet it didn't flee. The ranger noticed that it stayed by his side even now, despite the danger of so many guns pointed at it. The animal's loyalty, if that was what it was, burned a question into his mind. Why me? The leader gestured sharply. "Pull him away from it. Get him out of there. If it makes a move, we drop it." Two rangers stepped forward cautiously, rifles still raised. The wounded ranger's eyes widened in panic. "Stop!" he shouted, staggering forward, nearly falling to his knees. He reached out his uninjured hand toward them. "If you hurt it, you'll regret it. Listen to me. This fossa fought the poachers. It fought a hyena twice its size. It saved my life again and again. And you want to kill it just because you don't understand." His words echoed, clashing with the crackling of the flames around them. The rangers hesitated. Doubt flickered in their eyes. The leader narrowed his gaze, unconvinced. "Animals don't save men. They fight, they kill, they survive. That's what they do." The injured ranger's chest heaved as he shouted back, his voice raw. "Then explain why I'm still standing here. Explain why I'm breathing when I should have been dead hours ago. You call it an animal, I call it my savior." A heavy silence fell. The fire spread wider, smoke coiling through the air, glowing embers rising like sparks of fate. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, without warning, the fossa let out a sharp growl and stepped closer to the ranger, brushing its body against his leg as if claiming its place by him. The sight unsettled everyone. One ranger whispered, "It's protecting him." The leader scowled. "That's not protection. That's possession. If it stays here, it's a threat to all of us." The ranger's hand shook as he tightened his grip on his bloody arm. "Then it's a threat I'll take with me. No one touches it. Do you hear me?" His voice broke into a cough, his body trembling with weakness, yet his determination was iron. The men exchanged uncertain glances. They were trained to follow orders, but they respected the man before them. He wasn't just another ranger. He was someone who had led them before, someone who had stood in front of danger countless times. To see him defend a predator with such conviction shook their certainty. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the trees behind them. A ranger at the back shouted, "Movement! Something's out there." All heads snapped toward the sound. The torches revealed nothing but shifting shadows, but the footsteps were undeniable, more than one, and fast. The leader barked, "Positions! Protect the injured!" The ranger's heart sank. His thoughts raced back to the poachers. They had fled earlier, but what if they hadn't gone far? What if they had circled back, this time with more men? The forest erupted with noise. Figures burst from the darkness, armed men, faces hidden in cloth. Machetes and rifles glinting in the firelight. Poachers, at least 5 of them, maybe more, rushing forward with fury in their eyes. The rangers fired warning shots into the air, the thunder of gunfire shaking the night. The poachers didn't stop. They shouted, their voices thick with rage. "He's ours!" He saw too much. The wounded ranger felt his stomach drop. They hadn't come for the others. They had come for him. The Fossa growled, fur bristling, stepping in front of him again. One of the poachers noticed, sneering. "The beast again? Kill it first!" He raised his rifle. The ranger screamed, "No!" But before the shot could fire, the Fossa lunged forward like lightning, knocking the man off balance. His gun fired wildly, the bullet whistling past one of the rangers and tearing into a tree. Chaos erupted instantly. Gunfire, shouts, the clash of steel, the roar of fire growing stronger. The wounded ranger stumbled, trying to keep his balance as 2 of his comrades pulled him back. "We have to retreat," one of them shouted in his ear. "No!" he gasped. His eyes locked on the Fossa darting through the poachers, claws flashing, teeth tearing. "We can't leave it," the leader barked over the chaos. "Get him out! Now!" But the ranger resisted, shaking his head violently. "If you leave it, you leave me too." His words stunned those around him, even in the middle of the battle. They looked at him as though he had lost his mind. Yet when they saw the Fossa slam into another poacher, driving him back with savage ferocity, they hesitated. This wasn't an ordinary animal fight. This was something else, something that felt almost chosen. The fight raged on. Bullets cracked, steel clashed, fire roared. The ranger felt his vision blur, his body weakening from blood loss, but his spirit burned. He clutched the arm of the man holding him, forcing him to listen. "Don't let them kill it. Promise me." The younger ranger's eyes widened at the desperation in his voice. He nodded without thinking, then turned his rifle toward the poachers. At last, after minutes that felt like hours, the surviving poachers broke. One of them shouted, "Fall back! Fall back!" They melted into the trees, disappearing into the smoke and shadows, leaving behind the groans of their wounded. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of fire and the labored breaths of men. The clearing was a battlefield. Bodies sprawled, weapons scattered, smoke rising. The ranger sagged against the tree, his vision dim. The Fossa limped toward him, its fur scorched in places, its body bleeding from deep gashes, yet its eyes still locked on him with that strange, unbreakable connection. The leader lowered his rifle slowly, staring at the animal. His voice was rough, almost shaken. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe this isn't just an animal." The wounded ranger tried to smile, though his lips trembled. "I told you." He coughed, blood staining his chin. "It's more than that." But then his smile faded as his ears picked up a new sound, the distant crack of trees breaking. The ground beneath him shuddered faintly, like the forest itself was warning them. His eyes widened. The Fossa growled low, tail lashing. Whatever was coming was bigger than everything they had faced tonight, the ranger whispered almost to himself. This night isn't over yet, and as the flames licked higher into the sky, the forest seemed to hold its breath again, waiting for the next shadow to step out. The ranger's chest tightened as the ground trembled again, heavier this time, echoing through the soil beneath their feet. The remaining men gripped their rifles, scanning the smoky tree line. Then from the shadows, a shape emerged, not poachers this time, but a massive bull elephant, its tusks gleaming, its eyes wide with panic. The fire had driven it toward them, and its rage was uncontrollable. The rangers froze. An elephant stampede could wipe them all out in seconds. The wounded ranger could barely lift his voice, but he whispered hoarsely, Don't shoot it." But the leader shouted, "If we don't, it'll crush us all." The rifles lifted, fear filling the air again, and then, in a moment no one could have predicted, the Fossa leapt forward. Small, battered, wounded, yet unyielding. It darted directly in front of the elephant, weaving, growling, almost dancing through the smoke. The elephant's attention snapped to it, hesitating, swaying in confusion. The ranger cried out, "No! It's trying to save us again." His voice cracked with both awe and dread. The Fossa didn't attack, didn't flee. Instead, it stood firm, a tiny predator staring up at a towering giant, holding its ground with courage no human could comprehend. The elephant halted, snorted violently, then after a long moment of stillness, turned with a thunderous rumble and vanished back into the burning trees. Silence fell again, this time heavier, almost sacred. The men stared at the Fossa, breathing hard, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The ranger dropped to his knees, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. He whispered, almost choking on the words, "How many times can one life risk itself for another before we understand what it means?" The Fossa limped back toward him, collapsing at his side. Its sides heaved, blood darkened its fur, but its eyes still burned with that same unwavering fire. The ranger reached out with trembling fingers and laid his hand on its head. "You're not just an animal. You're the proof of something we've forgotten." The leader lowered his rifle slowly, his voice shaking for the first time. "And what's that?" The ranger looked at each of them, his voice steady despite his weakness. "That life, no matter whose it is, has value. That courage doesn't belong to humans alone. And that sometimes the wild isn't something to conquer. It's something to learn from." A hush spread across the group. Even the crackling flames seemed quieter, as though the forest itself was listening. Hours later, when the fire finally died and the night gave way to dawn, the rangers carried their injured comrade out of the forest. But none of them forgot the image burned into their minds, the Fossa standing between them and death. Time after time, not for food, not for instinct, but for something greater. The ranger lived, his wounds healing with time. Yet what healed deeper than his body was his spirit. Whenever he spoke of that night, he never called it a battle or a tragedy. He called it a lesson written in fire and blood, and he ended every telling with the same words: "Respect the wild. Protect it and it will protect you back." Moral lesson: the wild is not our enemy. It is a mirror that shows us courage, loyalty, and sacrifice in their purest forms. Every creature, no matter how small or feared, carries a lesson. If we learn to respect life in all its forms, we will discover that survival isn't about domination. It's about coexistence.